I did it. It's good.
You sure, Maggie?
Yep.
She works for tech support, so I feel like I should be able to
Do
trust
you
her.
really?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, everybody good?
You get it, Cody? Yeah.
And I'm assuming I got it someplace.
It's called round 1 AC because I just didn't bother to change the header, but it's round 2. Just in case you didn't know.
I'm gonna move this back.
Yes, I am the person you're in wiki spec against. Alright, is everybody ready?
Yes, sir.
Alright. First is harms of School of the Americas Skill Exporting Death Squads, WADI 15. School of the Americas was responsible for training over 64,000 South American soldiers, many of whom later became notorious torturers and murderers in death squads. The SOA was the biggest base for destabilization in Latin America. The SOA relocated to Fort Benning, Georgia, was renamed Winslow in 2001, allowing for an apparent termination of the previous program through disassociation. In reality, however, WINSEC retains its SOA foundations. The U.S. Department of Defense has shielded the Institute from criticism and outcry with regards to the school's historical human rights violation. Since 2000, renaming the SOA, other crimes linked to SOA graduates have come to light. Out of 25 Colombian graduates from 2001 to 2003, 12 had either been charged with a serious crime or commanded units whose members have reportedly committed multiple extrajudicial killings. The disassociation from the school's history under its original name, the SOA, is merely a premise for distancing the institution from the atrocities committed by its students and graduates. History, however, tells a different story. While WINSEC continues to emphasize what it describes as a commitment to human rights by citing a mere 8 hours of instruction in the subject, research, such as the report on Colombia's extrajudicial killings, reveals a reality that goes far beyond the cosmetic reforms employed by the institution. Subpoint 2 is the inherency. Congress has drugged their feet on the closure, and the FBI has actively investigated the anti-SOA movement. McCoskey and Susser in 15. The American Civil Liberties Union released documents showing the Federal Bureau of Investigation had initiated a counterterrorism investigation of SOA Watch, the human rights organization that coordinates anti-SOA activities. It also increased surveillance to priority level after noting the rapid growth of the movement. More frustrating than the movement is the calculus of Congress. The continued unwillingness of the congressional representatives to cut the school's funding has pushed activists to rethink their strategy. While they have not abandoned legislative efforts to close the school, movement leaders are now taking their messages directly to a new generation of Latin American heads of state, requesting these officials no longer send their soldiers to train at the SOLA/WINSEC. Thus the plan? The United States federal government, through an act of Congress, should permanently suspend operation of WINSEC and its training network and prohibit the reestablishment of any school in its place. Implementation and enforcement through the Secretary of the Army. Subpoint 3, solvency. Suspension of WINSEC closes it down and prevents its future military education efforts. McGovern in 13. Suspend the authority for the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation, the successor institution, United States Army School of the Americas. The Secretary of the Army shall suspend operation of the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation. The authority of the Secretary of Defense to operate an education and training facility under Section 2166 of Title 10 United States Code is suspended. Limitation on the establishment of a new education and training facility. No training or education facility may be established in the Department of Defense for Latin American military personnel as a successor to the United States Army School of the Americas. Subpoint 4, Southcom's role includes training of regional military leaders at WINSEC 10 and 16. To enhance professional development of the region's military officers and senior U.S. leaders, U.S. Southern Command conducts and facilitates international military education and training, military defense exchanges, and security seminars. These programs help build accountable, transparent armed forces that can ensure the sustainability of U.S. security cooperation investments at defense institutes like WINSEC. Advantage 1 is U.S. imperialism. Subpoint 1. Closing WINSEC forces the U.S. to recognize accountability for imperial operations in Latin America. McCoskey and Susser in 15. And what can the struggle to close the institution tell us about the government's efforts to package U.S. imperialism for domestic and foreign consumption? The controversy represents a battle of collective memory. It is a struggle over how the legacy of the School of the Americas and the broader history of 20th century U.S. interventionism in Latin America are understood in the United States. The U.S. has not experienced a period of national soul searching about its involvement in the dirty wars. The U.S. policymakers, the concept of human rights, and the theoretical and legal frameworks that are associated with it apply less to the United States than those to abroad. Controversy over the SOA and its clone, the WINSEC, is a struggle over beliefs about the intrinsic benevolence of U.S. power and the strength of those beliefs to remain unexamined and accepted as good. Subpoint 2, an ethic of accountability is the only way to solve for U.S. imperialism. Rowing 06. How can this instrumentalized relationship between responsibility and empire be challenged and reformulated? Spivak suggests 2 ways, each with an implication for philosophy of praxis. First is recasting responsibility as accountability. I can formalize responsibility in the following way. Is all action undertaken in response to a call? Response here not only involves respond to as in give an answer to, and the related situations of answering to as in being responsible for, a name of being answerable for. A pedagogy of global responsibility cannot simply articulate the duty to intervene. Cut the card there. Subpoint 3. Although the school claims to have reformed their curriculum, the fact the school has remained open sends a signal that the U.S. condones abuses in the name of imperialism. Koopman in 08. The school continues to serve as a signal because they're being taught to militaries we know are likely to put those skills to horrific use. These days, most of the students of the Colombian Army, which has an appalled record of killing. The school also has continued to train individuals who have known human rights violations. There has been no accountability in the U.S. for the atrocities. Those who wrote and taught for those manuals face no disciplinary action, and there's been no acknowledgement by the Army of wrongdoing. The failure of the U.S. Army to hold anyone accountable sends a signal to other militaries that violations of human rights are acceptable. Subpoint 5. U.S. imperialism weaves warfare into everyday life and prompts culturally hegemonic systems of domination. Only by focusing on the structural violence of these systems can we reorient the protocol away from ingrained imperialism. Cuomo 96. The omnipresence of militarism justifies the destruction of natural non-human enemies and communities during peacetime. Ethical approaches are not attending which ways warfare woven in the fabric of life lead to crisis-based politics and analysis. Crisis-based politics distract attention from the need for sustained resistance to enmeshed systems of domination. The omnipresence of militarism allows the false belief that the absence of declared armed conflicts is peace, particularly easy for those shaped by privilege. Resistance is immobilized when the real violence finally occurs, the point at which it is difficult not to respond in ways that make resistors drop all their political priorities. Crisis-driven attention keeps resistors complacent. Seeing wars embedded draws attention that horrific violence is happening all over. Subpoint 6. Before they question our method of working within the state to reform it, research proves it's comparatively better. Grossberg 92. The left has to work with against and within bureaucratic systems of government. The most effective struggle was accomplished by mobilizing popular pressure on governmental institutions. Got the card there. Subpoint 7. The state is the most influential actor in international politics. Individuals identify with the state and won't accept other actors. Kiriama 2K. The state must continue to serve as the indispensable actor because the largest entity in which people can identify themselves with continues to be the state. And we see in the future will be no change in this regard. Even in the case of private organizations, the state is the actor that must create the rules they advocate in areas such as human rights, humanitarian issues, and the environment. I won't read the Cook 92 evidence. And with that, I'll go ahead and open myself up for cross-examination. Just the speeches there.
Totally forgot. Alright, so first, who exactly are you holding accountable?
So the Roy evidence indicates that there's a two-way accountability. One, there's an accountability of U.S. policymakers for the imperialistic policies that they've engaged in, but it's also a self-accountability that we recognize our own complicity in the U.S. imperial actions and the way we have not held our leaders to task for those issues.
Alright, what is the WINSEC training network?
WINSEC training network? Oh, WINSEC so operates a number of different training facilities, both pretty much in Latin America, where they train, they basically rotate people from those training sites into WINSEC and back out to facilitate this training network. Things at like the Soto Canto Air Base, as well as additional other little camps throughout Latin America, these individuals are trained out. We're gonna close down the entire network.
So what about other training networks here in the United States?
I mean, if you want to make an argument that those other training networks exist, I would say that, especially if you're going to read like the week's evidence that there are 216 other schools, that's probably going to fall into the training network, and we're going to cut the WINSEC portion of the training. Meaning, like, if you want to make a circumvention argument, we can have that debate, but my analysis would still be is that WINSEC particularly, and the particular training done by WINSEC is uniquely bad.
Okay. On your inherency, you stated there has somewhere you stated that there has to be So what about these Latin American heads of state that are requesting that these officials no longer send soldiers to train at SOA WINSEC? Like, so doesn't that kind of show that like SCO is already developing this kind of adamance against WINSEC?
A couple arguments I would make is I wouldn't agree with that. I would think particularly it doesn't do a good job of specifying. I would contest that it is countries who are already vehemently opposed to the U.S. But I also think when you look to countries like Colombia, in which it is the individual. You have to look at the way the WINSEC training is set up. It's not necessarily the individual people, these countries who want to go. It's these countries' militaries being sent there that then terrorize the civilians. But additionally, I think when you look to the Koopman 08 evidence, it does a really great job of explaining how the school is a unique symbol to other militaries that human rights abuses are accepted. Meaning we have to close that down, even if you buy that there is still a little bit of SCO solvency. I would say the Koopman evidence indicates that it's still bad, and the Wadi evidence indicates that they're still training death squads, particularly of the Colombian military.
Okay, cool. Do you consider IMET part of the training network?
IMET is a funding mechanism.
Okay. So close. I can't actually.
So if you're gonna run
so
the
are you
count
closing?
line.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna have that. Yeah, I don't know why. I'm kind of playing with government to be ran.
Okay, you want to use prep?
No, I'm just gonna send my file. I know exactly what I'm
Okay. What's the order?
My let me send my file, or do you want me to use prep while I'm getting the file up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Alright.
So, how do you spell WINSEC?
WHINSEC.
Thank you.
No problem.
Huh. Cool. So when you get that, you go.
Okay.
Did you get it?
Let me make sure it downloads and opens correctly. Yep, I got it.
Sorry, 1:43. Starting time at 7 minutes. 6 minutes, 7 minutes.
This is 7.
So I'm gonna go on case with 2 arguments. I'm gonna skip the militarization date. It's in function.
So no off case?
2 off case.
Oh, 2 off cases, but starting on case.
No, I'm gonna 2 off then on.
Start 2 off, okay.
2 off then on. I was like him because there's another DA on it that I'm not running.
Okay.
I guess if you see it, you'll see it.
Did you send me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So where are you going?
T, Russia, skipping militarization, then on case. And I'm gonna skip cards as it comes because I know you know a few of these.
Okay. Alright.
I kind of messed up when I prepped this. Cool. Okay, anyways, A is the interpretation. Latin America is all countries, part of the Americas, south of the U.S. that speak Spanish or Portuguese. Black's Law 16. Latin America, Western Hemisphere designated countries where Spanish or Portuguese is spoken. B is the violation. He closes 238, so he has 16 schools that are not in Latin America and have no association with the Southern Command. He has provided no card saying these schools have any association with this. The second violation is extra topicality. The fact that his plan should be proven topical in a vacuum. And like if it's not, being accuracy hurts fairness education because it explodes from the ground, making it possible for the negative to win. On to the stand. First is depth of regret. Debating a small number of issues forces deeper research into topic literature. LD is uniquely structured to empower detailed analysis on policy issues. This is internally to education. The second standard is bright line. Either you affect forces in Latin American territory or you affect more than just forces in Latin America. C is clash. Clear structure enables debaters to recognize and address the key arguments presented in a position, fostering better clash in the debate round. This is the internally to education. By allowing him to close all of the 237 other schools, he no links at a critical neg ground. D is the voters. First, NFALD rules say he's a voting issue. Second is competing interpretations. Evaluate the interpretations best for debate rather than accept arbitrary definition from the app. This avoids judge intervention and incentivizes educational debate. His position should be evaluated on whichever interpretation is better as judged by the standards. On to the disadvantage. First uniqueness is Russia seeking to create Latin American conflict. Blank 14. Russia seeks bases from which it can threaten the U.S. and demonstrate power projection capabilities. Its efforts attempt to create conflict with Latin America. Russia's goals entail the deliberate and substantial worsening of East-West relations and of Latin American problems. Second is U.S.-Latin American relations depend on cooperation and check Russian aggression. Blank 9. Russian interest in gaining positions in Latin America has only become possible by decline of U.S. power. Latin Americans prefer the U.S. based on its acceptance of their needs and interests. Link. First, plan decreases engagement with Latin America, breaking coalition. Blank 14. The U.S. cannot take Latin America for granted. It must reverse the perception of disengagement if it wants multilateral coalitions on issues of regional significance. We must increase our military cooperation and advisor training programs with these governments. This also applies to cooperation in police issues like counter-narcotics. Second link is plan reduces U.S. presence, triggers Latin American shift towards Russia. Cicero 16. Latin America's shift toward Russia is due to the relative inactivity or lack of interest by American policymakers in the region. Latin America has received mixed messages from the U.S. and its leadership. Internally, first, Russia will increase counter-narcotic influence in the region. Bargain 13. Russia is to step up counter-narcotics operations in Latin America. To increase its influence in the region, Russia announced its plans to work with Latin American countries in joint counter-narcotic operations, helping develop common anti-drug policies. In Nicaragua, Russia is setting up an anti-drug training center, also announced plans to increase cooperation with Peru. Russia attempts to increase its influence in Latin America to bypass U.S. dominance. Second, internally, is Russia established new drug gulags. HIV infection proliferate. All 16. Western governments understand that managing drug use is far less destructive than fighting to eradicate it. Russia refuses to accept this. Viktor Ivanov, director of the Federal Drug Control Service, outlined proposals to mirror Soviet-era labor camps to rehabilitate drug addicts. Moscow's tendency to link drug addiction with criminality further exacerbates the problems and has caused HIV infection to increase from 170,000 to 1.2 million over the past decade. Russia's influence has led the country to an export policy with similar effectiveness. Third term is Russia detonates Latin American arms race, arming violent non-state actors. Blank 14. Moscow's arms sales are the most dangerous of its policies in Latin America. Moscow seeks an arms race. Brazilian reports have raised the specter of Venezuela detonating continental arms race. These weapons migrate from Venezuela to the far. Russian arms will underwrite armed insurgencies and drug running. Fourth is destroying U.S.-Latin American relations will increase the risk of nuclear proliferation. The Partnership of Americas Commission of 2008. In a hemispheric partnership remains elusive, the cost of the United States and its neighbors will be high. Without proper safeguards, the risk of nuclear proliferation will increase. Impacts. First, HIV/AIDS will spread globally, causing human extinction. Maritro 2000. AIDS is the most serious threat to humankind. It has no cure yet. We are watching ghastly skeletons finally succumb to the most excruciating, dehumanizing death. The AIDS challenge is a fundamental one that threatens to wipe out humanity. Second is nuclear proliferation results in nuclear war. Growing 15. The greatest threat posed by the spread of nuclear weapons is the probability that there will be a catastrophic nuclear war. The state with a nuclear advantage might believe that it has splendid first strike capability. The state with a small and vulnerable nuclear arsenal might decide to strike first rather than risk having its entire nuclear arsenal destroyed. One state might start a nuclear war in the belief that the war is inevitable and that it would be better to go first than to go second. Skipping the militarization DA. On case on solvency, first is the turn of lily pads. Closing large bases like these training facilities frees up funding for small covert sites called lily pads. David Vine 15. Planners want bases free of the kinds of restrictions the military faced during the Arab-Israel wars of the 70s. The Pentagon is increasingly turning to small covert sites scattered around the globe referred to simply as lily pads. The attractiveness to the shift of bases from larger bases to smaller ones has clearly been the lower cost involved. Most are located in countries easily influenced by the economical and political payoffs promised by bases, and where labor and other operating costs are lower. Poorer countries' less stringent environmental regulations also make operations cheaper and easier. Second is transition to lily pads cement U.S. military control over the planet and cause endless intervention. This turns the affect when we're trying to stop U.S. imperialism. Military command wants to be able to turn to another conveniently close country if the United States is ever prevented from using a base, as it was by Turkey prior to the invasion of Iraq. Officials dream of nearly limitless flexibility, the ability to react to developments anywhere on Earth, something approaching total military control over the planet. Washington is planning to use lily pad bases and other military protections to bind countries in Latin America as closely as possible to the U.S. military to continue U.S. political and economic hegemony. American officials hope the military might will entrench their influence into as many countries as possible in American orbit at a time where some are asserting their independence even more forcefully. That card there. Next on the solvency, no solvency. The little a is a double blind. Either WINSEC is the most reformed military institution or the other 237 training schools perpetuate imperialism. Weeks 15. There are 238 institutions in the United States that train in the United States, not in Latin America, that train Latin American soldiers over thousands of courses and tens of thousands of students. There's no overreaching requirement for human rights training in any of them. Given that no other school in the military system has been targeted by an NGO, the changes in SOA are clearly explained by the efforts of the SOAW. Skipping the next card. The next card is the little d is plan doesn't hold anyone accountable, so you can't actually solve for legitimacy. Wilkins 16. In order to create real change, we can't rely on politicians to make it happen for us. The SOAW national organizer Hendrik Voss told Daily Cost and email statement. We have to organize and build broad grassroots power and hold those who are making decisions that affect our lives accountable. Skipping the next card. On the advantage, first on his first two cards, there's no recognizing U.S. imperial actions when the U.S. is really overthrowing governments, and two, there's no ethic accountability from the U.S. overthrowing governments just further their own capitalistic greed and illegal operations. Luke 15. When you want, okay.
Alright, I'm going to delete the Luke 15 evidence.
Yeah.
And then you didn't read the Stottle card either?
I did not.
Okay.
So I didn't read the little B, the little C, the little E,
You didn't
or the
answer
Stottle.
the cool one, okay. ready for cross-sections?
Okay, that's for cross-sections, I think. Yeah.
Cool. So on your interpretation, where does your card actually indicate that it's south of the U.S.? All it does is like list countries. Where does it actually indicate south of the U.S.?
It doesn't indicate.
Okay. Anyway, let's move on.
Spanish
And
or Portuguese.
where do you, on the violation level, where do you specify like what schools aren't in Latin America? Like, want to read me some?
I mean, you can look to the card that I read. That like all 238 of them that I read in that card are in the United States.
Which card were you talking about?
The
got it on there?
the weak card.
The week's evidence?
Yeah, the weak evidence.
Sure. Okay. But like, all right. On the standards level, hold on. You make like you blip out an extra T argument. What's the extra T argument? Is that like an independent violation or just like a standard?
It's an independent violation.
Okay.
I just forgot what it was.
Cool. So competing interps are solid then?
Yeah.
It's cool. All right. Let's talk about Russia.
Okay.
All right. So Russia's been seeking to create Latin American conflict for the past 3 years. Why haven't they already?
Because the United States is there. The United States is doing things like training Latin American soldiers, and so Latin America continues going towards the United States because they prefer the United States to Russia. But at the point where
So all I have to prove is that we pulled out of Latin America a little bit since 14 or since 2009 per your blank evidence, and I win the dissad?
no, you have to prove that we pulled out, and that Russia hasn't specifically stepped in that instance. Because even the card is saying we
Okay.
pulled out in counter-narcotics, Russia then stepped in counter-narcotics.
Sure. Let's talk about lily pads.
That's it.
So where in this evidence does it ever mention anywhere in Latin America? Because I see Turkey, I see these other nations, like where is this lily pads turn specific that we're doing this in Latin America? And specific like what countries and what bases would we be shipping to?
There's actually 2 right now in Latin America. I realized I didn't read a card on this, so I guess you can argue that. But there's 2 in Latin America. One's in Honduras, one is in El Salvador.
Okay, sure. And like, what exactly are we doing there right now then?
That's an extension that I have as well. Basically, what we do is we have these bases that aren't actually bases there, and what happens is we use these bases in first we give the host country.
Okay,
bases,
I got you.
and things like that.
How do I reduce funding?
Closing a bunch of schools.
Am I closing the schools or am I closing down the WinSec training program? That's the debate here. Let's go to the solvency argument, right? On this doesn't hold anyone accountable. So it just says that like we can't rely on politicians to make it happen for us, but where does it say that like we can't advocate government policy on our own?
It doesn't.
Okay. So like,
But the fact that it has about half of those grassroots now.
okay, sure. Alright. Here. Got it.
I really like that water bottle.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, you want prep time?
Yeah, take
Okay,
part.
good.
questions left.
Yep.
The order will be T, just add case. Let me just shoot that over. Alright, Cody, let me know if you got it. You got it?
C. Oh, there I go, got it. Give me a second.
I assume I got it, thank you.
Okay. You get Cody?
That's open, it's open, it's open. Sorry, it's this one. No, really? There it goes, there it goes.
Alright. Everyone ready?
Yeah.
Order?
T, just add case.
Oh,
First on his interpret, it's uniquely problematic. He never actually says south of the U.S. This is going to be bad because his own interpretation means I can meet, that I can meet because it doesn't actually isolate the U.S. Second on his violation level, it doesn't actually specify like what schools I would be closing that would be inside the U.S. Probably means that when he doesn't read like an actual specific violation, he'll bite it. But 3 reasons why his interpret's bad. 1, explodes, limits the interpretation, destroys the resolution under their interp. Absent function in Quebec or Texas or California could be topical, terrible for limits. Actually, you know what? Go ahead and kick the explodes limit standards. Not even going to read that. Second, accessibility. Actually, you know, just drop down to the turn argument. We'll go for the turn. Turn, the definition of Latin America being based on language is part of the colonial legacy. Marie McNown, 16. The region deserves to be defined on its own terms beyond dismissive stereotypes rather than being known as simply the West Wall neighbor of the USA. If you go by the definition as the region of Americas where Latin languages are spoken, these languages are Spanish, Portuguese, and French, part of the legacy of the colonization of the continent by European powers starting in the 16th century. The impact is not just physical violence, but a genocide of both the body and mind through the erasure of non-European cultures. Independent reason to vote down the NEG, Mignolo, and Tatosta 9. Genocide is a consequence of colonialism. Genocide is possible because certain human rights are dispensable. It was not about the dispensity of human rights in terms of economy, but it presented the barrenness of life. Genocide is a tool for the eradication of culture. You do not kill on purpose as a consequence of use. In colonial Peru, there was the eradication of ideology. They do not kill, they just wanted to conquer souls. Cut the card here. On the top, County, line by line, proper, 1 I meet. Winsec rotates training between the school and Fort Benning, and training facilities physically located in Latin America, style 14. Troops on training missions have been rotated in and out of Fort Benning to train forces inside Honduras. Although students still come to Fort Benning, this new model relies on a heavy dose of in-country training of local military and security forces. Cut the card here. Second is counterinterp. Role means influence, Macmillan Dictionary 16. The influence of someone or something in a particular situation. 3 is I make the counterinterp. If you look to the resolution, its entire context, I just have to reduce the role of Southern Command in Latin America. Role means influence, so since Winsec influences Latin America, I'm topical. 4 reasons prefer. A is the reasonability decision rule. If the affirmative is meaning a reasonable interpretation of the topic and making a reasonable attempt to limit the role in South Common Latin America, you don't vote us down. Answers any predictability argument, clash arguments. I'm running something that restricts U.S. training in Latin American military. Additionally, predictability changes round to round depending on what they want to limit out. Reasonability stays stable. Is prefer reasonability. My interpretation is based on the entire resolution, not a single word. C is limits. Counterinterpret provides best limits to the topic, taking a more holistic view of how Southern Command operates in Latin America. Key to topic-specific education, so we avoid over-limiting, so we can actually broach the intersectional issues of the topic. You can group this in with the extra T. Extra T is going to be the best model for education. We take a more holistic approach on how to actually solve issues. Real congressional policy is not bound by just a certain artificial topic. Means that we probably, even if he wins and I am extra topical, which I don't think I am based on my IME, we're still going to win that we're the best model for education under his competing interpretations framework because extra T allows us to take a holistic view of how the policy should be passed in order to solve things on the voters. A is education. Turn, top category when it's affirmative, creativity, church, portable skills, the ability to think about feet and come up with alternative solutions to help build problem solving skills. Creativity is one of the skills key to critical thinking, which means the T towards our epistemological development. 2 is turn. Education, my opponent prescribes as a mean of extending colonialism. The focus on the affirmative is key to create a better form of education that critically questions imperialism. If I win the education standard, I win the T and I win the debate. Male 14. Education serves as a means to colonize the mental universe. In many cases, it would be a watered down education, which gives the colonized the illusion of education beyond par with the education of the tropical. Cut the card there. Second, fairness is not a voting issue, it's just internally into education, but turn top cows another instance of imperialists dictating what is fair, like the way the U.S. imperialists set up democratic elections in Latin American countries, overthrew governments that were not favorable to U.S. interests. She only serves to prop up and defend imperialist interests. C, NFL rules don't tell me don't punish me if I'm not topical, don't let them get away with lazy arguments on the dissad. Non-unique, Russia's already expanded the region, opened a training facility, should have triggered your impacts to Luca, January 28th. Putin has established strong relations with the nations of the Living Alliance with the Peoples of America. The organization was created in opposition to the United States-backed free trade area for the Americas, which is seen by Latin American and Caribbean countries as a form of American imperialism. The Russians send large quantities of weapons to the Libyan alliance nations. Russia sold more than 3,000 surface to air missiles to Latin American countries. Argentina's former president Cristina Kirchner was one of the few leaders to support Russia's aggression in Crimea. Got the card there. Next turn, extend the Wadi 15 evidence where it says SOA was the big space for destabilization of Latin America. Closing SOA Wednesday is key to stabilization of Latin America, which solves your impacts. The aft turns and outweigh the disad. Second is going to be turn. Russian engagement is good for Latin America. Ellis, January 5th. Russia was forgiving 90% of the $35 billion outstanding debt that Cuba had run up. Putin participated in the annual BRICS summit in Valdezzo, where he secured the organization's neutrality on Russian activities in Ukraine. Third is going to be my conceded Colombo evidence functions as a critique of his crisis-based politics and realism. It literally indicates that we can't focus on these scenarios when we have structural issues going back. It's literally just a function of privilege to be able to detract from the real issues. When he concedes his Colombo evidence, it's an independent criticism that impacts out to the forms of structural violence and everyday militarism that the Colombo talks about. Probably means it's going to straighten the disad on case. Lily pads is really bad. I don't close entire bases, just schools, like in the same way that I don't close Fort Benning, I only close Wednesday. I'm only closing the schools. He doesn't tell you enough about what the funding would be to actually trigger this. Two, it's not specific to Latin America. It only talks about Middle East countries and doesn't actually give you a timeline. It speaks in the past, probably means that it doesn't actually, his cards don't indicate that they're going to do in the future. Additionally, don't let him read new links in the 1R on funding. Probably means that he's not going to be able to answer anything. Additionally, he concedes the Koopman 8 and the Cuomo 96 evidence. Cuomo is a K of this case term because he still focuses around a single crisis-based politic, which is going to be uniquely bad for that structural everyday militarism that we engage in. But second, on the Weeks evidence, Weeks concludes after 1AC takes uniquely expands a protest to other training institutions, which is the main criticism that Weeks makes. I'm not going to read the card, but fundamentally, because we're expanding to other institutions, we're closing all of it, means we solve the Weeks evidence. He tries to make the grassroots argument, but we are grassroots. You need to read the inherency evidence. Additionally, extend across my analysis from the Kuriyama and Cook evidence that literally says we have to engage through the state or else violent elites fail. We can see this like Donald Trump, and the way the right has already ascended in the mainstream probably means you're not going to be able to vote on the solvency takeout.
Just hold an early link on one and see. That's gonna see.
Okay, 143 used, you're gonna use or just talk?
I'm gonna use it. I think my answers.
Two left.
It's not letting me play at all. How, what's your email? I think, oh, there it is, alright.
Got it?
Yeah. We're going back to the thing. Okay. Alright, let me see the evidence first. That's what I got.
What?
That's what I got.
What do you, sorry.
I sent you some stuff. I guess I sent you guys stuff. What I got is what I got. Let's see how well I can make it work.
Okay, so map,
T.
T, left.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, on your file, okay, somehow it's an RTF. Okay,
everybody good?
sure.
So first I'm gonna read some cards, and then I'm gonna answer this stuff, and then I'll cross out the cards as needed, and all that stuff. Ready?
Okay, I'll start with you.
Hold on, I'm not,
Okay, wait.
so, okay,
Just gonna read the cards, and then I'll start answering, and then I'll cross out the cards as needed with extended articulation mode.
okay.
First, the deliberation skills, hospitality facilitates a process of success debate that develop important skills and
Speed.
fosters appreciation from multiple perspectives. Abandoning the topic forecloses the education and democratic benefits of debate. Bloomberg 10. Debate is a critical tool for civic deliberation. inculcates skills for the creative and open-minded discussion and disputes debate, and invites interlocutors to think together creatively in the context of successive strategic iteration, moments of evaluation and reiteration of arguments in the context of structural public discussion. Debate creates a broader appreciation for multiple perspectives on the issue. The conclusion is especially powerful when one considers debate as a whole process of inventing, discussing, employing, and reformulating arguments. In the process of researching, strategizing, debating, reframing stances, and switching sides on a question, students are provided with a framework for thinking about a problem and solutions from a number of different angles. The cumulative effects of preparing for, performing, and evaluating a debate provide the widest possible exposure to varied positions a student might take. Second, constructive constraints. Absolute affirmative flexibility leaves the negative without meaningful ground to advance well-developed counter-arguments. Establishing boundaries is important because they spur imagination, innovation, improving the qualities of debate. Thomas and Brown 11. Learning should be viewed in terms of the environment where the context in which learning happens, the boundaries that define it, and the student teaching information within it all coexist and shape each other in mutually reinforcing ways. Boundaries serve not only as constraints but also as catalysts for innovation. Encountering boundaries spurs the imagination to become more active in figuring out novel situations within the constraints of the context. Environments with well-defined and carefully constructed boundaries can be described as a set of pressures that nudge and guide change that are subtracts for evolution. Impacts. The first impact is education loss without deliberation. Even if the content of the affirmative is valuable, the process they endorse is not. Debating topic challenges students to articulate and defend positions grounded in the best evidence for and against the proposition. Knowledge of the topic increases depth and inquiry, and quality of evaluation. Ludenberg 10. Debate practices facilitate application to students' everyday lives. Debate is uniquely effective in fostering application because it demands that the student have a comprehensive grasp on the subject area, but that they articulate a position relative to the issues in the debate and evaluate competing claims in relation to the strength of evidence. Debate practice fosters an evaluation of a student's position relative to an issue, light of the best arguments for and against a proposition. Debate bridges the gap between theoretical knowledge and specific personal stands. One might take both toward a specific resolution towards critical argumentative connections, yet given a resolution access, debate has the potential to create a depth of inquiry and evaluation that is unparalleled, both in terms of knowledge of the subject area and in terms of own investments relative to the propositions at hand. Fourth is deliberation skills are the most significant impact because they determine a student's ability to effectively communicate the content of a position. Prioritizing content over process leaves students less prepared to vigorously defend their opinions when challenged by well-prepared opponents in non-debate settings. The second impact is the loss of constructive constraints cause loss of innovation. Their topicality bad arguments assume that boundaries constrain innovation. We critique this assumption. Topicality, not framework, is the best way to encourage creativity and imagination within the confines of a bounded environment. Prefer evidence from education innovation expert Thomas and Brown 11. Different people present with the same information will learn different things. Imagine two students learning to play piano. The lesson of the day is a Bach prelude. The first student attacks the piano, banging out each note correctly but with violent intensity. The second student varies the rhythm, modifies the melody, and follows his own internal musings. Today's class, the teacher will see two students doing it wrong. In the new culture of learning, the teacher will see a budding rock star in a jazz museum. The story illustrates a fundamental principle. Students learn the best when they are about to follow their passion and operate within the constraints of a bounded environment. Both elements matter. Without the boundary, there would be no medium for growth. Next is topic-specific education. We encourage, critique, and require the app to have a critical defense tied to the plan. This requires much less generic research than their interpretation. This mix is, I'm not going to go that far. Okay, on to the T. The first thing that they say is that this turns the definition because of the part of the colonial language. You classify the cards I just read here, that the fact that these bounds are necessary to have a fair debate and to increase definition. By him just coming up here and saying this is bad because of this, we destroy those bounds and we lose all education from debate. Next. So at that point he has an impact on that. At the point where the impact of the card I just read is great, it outweighs his. Next, on his IME, he says Windex rotates trainees between schools in Fort Benning and training facilities located in Latin America. You missed the argument where in the Weeks card where it says specifically that these training schools are in the United States. At that point, he's not just closing schools in Latin America, and he's still extra T in violating this procedure. I'll get to why extra T is bad in a second. On the counter, role means influence in defining all this bad. First defining. First, you should look to words individually to see what they mean. Individually and see how they function. To get a more in-depth meaning of what the resolution says. Next, on reasonability, you should prefer counter-interpretation because everyone has different definitions of what reasonability means. Some people think it's reasonable to eat 3 Big Macs, but that's not really that reasonable for some others. Next, on on predictability, they say that the average predictable win sec has been the problem isn't with predictability. The problem is with the standards that I put in. Next, on the voters, so we're gonna go down to the voters for both of these. First, on the voters, I said that the rules specifically state that T is a voting issue and you should vote him down. Don't let him get away with that argument. Second, look to my competing interpretation. My competing interpretation specifically states that you should be voting on the standards provided in my speech. At that point where if I'm winning my standards, you will be voting on this topicality. Okay, on to my standards. First, my standard is depth over breadth. That by allowing him to do things in the United States, he destroys depth over breadth. We're better for depth over breadth. Second is Brightline. By forcing him to be in Latin America, we're better for Brightline. In Clash, we have no Clash to the point where you just don't think I have any argument.
I'll take my 52 seconds prep.
Okay,
Load it up. Hold on, I gotta get it on my timer. And go.
Go.
Alright, the order's going to be, let me send you one card.
Thank you.
Order will be the T, starting on the top of the T on the violation level, and then answering the cards about his education model, and then back to the standards debate. We got it, Cody.
Downloading now.
There'll be a quick overview on top, I guess. Instead, it's like an overview on top. You don't have to flow the overview separately, but it's just a crystallization. You good?
I mean, yeah, I guess not responding, so I don't need desperately need to be open.
It's just one card, and then, I mean, it's gonna get analytically cross-plotted anyway.
Here it is, yeah.
Alright, everyone ready? Cody makes a lot of problems on this piece. He reads all these cards, but I don't even have to win these cards for 3 key reasons. One, he drops my analysis of his interpretation that says his own interpretation doesn't exclude the United States. Means I'm always gonna meet under his interpretation. That goes cold conceded. That's an I meet. I win. Second, extend across my counter interpretation goes cold conceded. He doesn't put any work on why his interpretation is better than mine. Probably means that you're going to default to my interpretation. Third, he drops my framework for reasonability. All he does is argue about some hamburger. Probably means you're going to be able to at least, even if you buy his interpretation, evaluate it through my framework for reasonability. Let's go on to his model arguments. I don't blow up the deliberative model. You shut down your own model because we can't deliberate about imperialism's turn. I actually expand the deliberative model to a better form because I allow us to actually deliberate about the nature of education itself, and the education we're receiving in this debate space means I'm always going to be able to link back into that model. But additionally, he makes this this absolute flexibility argument is bad. A few arguments. One, reasonability and disclosure. Check your absolute flex arguments. Like, if I'm making an attempt to be topical, I'm still going to be able to work under your model, but I would still argue that the disclosure aspect of itself, particularly about how often my cases, means you have enough predictability to be able to check me. But additionally, there are no limits. Arguments are overstated. Openness is a leap of faith guided by ethics, which prevents the abuse of conversational encounters. Blecker and Lead 6. The typical objection is that it leads into a relative void in which it becomes impossible to separate good and evil. Our difficult ethical decisions must be taken when events have shaken the very foundation of principles. At moments which good and evil need to be revisit the card there. Let's keep going down here. I still access your education model. I don't defend that I don't have to be topical, just that your specific topicality shuts down the delivered model. Probably going to be a straight term. Like I said, reasonability and disclosure makes limits on the topic, force me to engage in your model, consider it a no link to your K. But additionally, it doesn't even matter. I always meet because his interp doesn't exclude the US in his card. Second turn, his response to my turn is that this argument, his argument that it's necessary to engage in this colonialization because it's necessary for the topic, turn this argument is selfish and rooted in privilege. Let's colonize people to ensure that I can sit in a college room and debate. Like, that is a super privileged argument. It's probably going to be enough of a unique turn to bite the evidence. But additionally, I give you a unique framework for evaluating reasonability. You can pull the trigger here. He just doesn't answer it effectively. He just talks about the hamburger. It's non-responsive. It means you prefer my framework that as long as I'm making an attempt to limit Southern Command in Latin America, you do enough to pull the trigger. But additionally, on his clash arguments, it's checked by reasonability. I give him full access to his generics. It's not my fault if he doesn't choose to go for like this generic lily pad argument in the 1 in R. No reason to punish the negative. But additionally, extend across the affirmative. Extend across my education turns. He cold concedes the over limiting argument. Probably means you're going to be able to buy this for 2. Doesn't even respond to the education turn. I still am able to access his model because I'm still engaged in the deliberative nature. If anything, I improve his model because I allow us to deliberate on education itself. That's going to be the impact level of the education turn that goes cold conceded. Again, if I win that I create better education, I win the debate. That was a decision rule that goes cold conceded, meaning you only have to evaluate this for models. Extend across the that extra T means I engage in a better education model. Probably another reason to vote for my interpretation.
I got $40 for it. Okay, I've been told no feedback.